Welcome back. The borders are opening next month. The new guidelines require visitors to South Africa to arrive with a negative COVID-19 test result not older than 72 hours before departure. For more on this, we're joined by vaccinologist Professor Shabir Madhi. Prof, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. The reality of false negatives would come into effect here, and we're worried about that. How safe are we with this decision?
So good evening to you, and I think there's two parts to it. The first part is that you are correct. The sensitivity of tests, the nasopharyngeal swabs, is roughly about 70% to start off with. And we're actually not too sure what the sensitivity of that test is in the absence of symptoms. And it might be less than 70%. In addition to which, after a person is tested, it doesn't mean that they might not be infected in that 72-hour period. As an example, going to an airport lounge might well predispose a person from being infected. So personally, I think there's extremely limited value in terms of requesting people to be tested. And we also need to remember that asking people to be tested before they enter into the country disadvantages people such as those living in Zimbabwe, where the cost of a test is roughly about $75, more than what average Zimbabwean probably earns on a weekly basis. So it biases against people coming from some of the neighboring countries, and it probably has got limited value.
And that's why it's a concern, Prof. So, I mean, is this the right decision, though?
Well, I don't think it's going to be of much use. And it certainly is not going to make any sort of meaningful impact in terms of what happens next in South Africa with regard to the COVID-19 outbreak. The incoming travelers, even if they are infected and even if they come with the virus in South Africa, we need to understand that South Africa is not New Zealand. It's not Iceland. It's not those countries that have been able to contain the spread of the virus. We're at a very different stage in terms of the outbreak. And irrespective of travelers coming into the country or not, what is going to drive a resurgence of the virus in South Africa is not a few international travelers, but rather the behavior of South Africans in terms of adherence to non-pharmaceutical interventions, the whole issue of mass gatherings. Those are the factors which, if we don't actually comply to, it's going to drive the resurgence of the virus. Not a few travelers that come into the virus, as occurred in the initial phase of this outbreak, when there was the seeding of the virus by international travelers. But right now, the spread of the virus has been so disseminated that it really doesn't add much value to have travelers be screened before they enter into the country.
But we did see a resurgence and a second wave in other countries that almost immediately reopened their borders, right? So why wouldn't that apply here?
Yeah, so the resurgence has occurred. There's two big differences in terms of what's happening in France, Italy, Spain, the United Kingdom. Firstly, the resurgence that occurred in those countries coincided with the end of the summer vacation period. And exactly what I mentioned right now is that that's probably what will happen in South Africa during the December vacation period, when people become more complacent about non-pharmaceutical interventions, mass gatherings. And that drives the recirculation of the virus, in addition to which Europe is again going into its autumn-winter period. And there might be a climatic factor in terms of what allows the efficiency of this virus to transmit. Now, making a direct comparison between South Africa and Europe, so in Europe it's not being driven because of immigrants and international travel. It's being driven because of what's taking place mostly in those countries in terms of non-pharmaceutical intervention adherence during the summer vacation. And that's the reason why we see more young adults this time around being infected at an earlier stage in the outbreak. Now, the other big difference between South Africa and many of the European countries, and although this data needs to be verified for South Africa with more systematic surveillance, is that what seems to have happened in South Africa is that a much larger percentage of the population have been infected with this first wave, compared to what happened in Europe, where about 10 to 15% of the population were only infected with the first wave. In South Africa, the figure is probably closer to 1/3 of the adult population that have been infected, especially in densely populated areas. And that difference is of substance when it comes to predicting what will happen if there is a resurgence. So Europe probably faces a more dire scenario than were there to be a resurgence in South Africa in terms of the second wave.
Yeah.
Because we've got more people that have developed immunity against the virus the first time around.
Yeah, you know, I get that, and I fully understand what you're saying about the impact it's going to have when we allow foreigners back into the country, but it still is going to be a contributing factor in the spread of the virus, isn't it?
No, not really. It's going to have a nominal effect. It will have some effect, but it will have, in fact, if visitors do what other South Africans are being asked to do, and that is adhere to non-pharmaceutical interventions, the effect that it's going to have in terms of a resurgence is going to be nominal.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. Appreciate it. That, of course, is vaccinologist Professor Shabir Madhi.